Ya Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. It actually feels really good to say that in a room of people, let me say. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Can I also acknowledge and recognise all the VIP guests here, and importantly, the most important people in the room, all the young people who we are here to recognise for their educational excellence. I was just saying to Talal that it was heartwarming to see as every name was announced and every award was announced, the pride in this room and just that level of excitement in this room. We truly, as a community, mashallah, we have so much to look forward to in the future generations of Muslim Australians. So I do want to congratulate all the award winners, all the finalists who are receiving awards this evening. You know, I think about the importance of education, and I stand here speaking to you as somebody who has spent 24 years, I think, roughly, 24 years of my life in formal education. That's around half of my life plus a few more years, right? So for those of you who are trying to do the maths, that's X equals 24 times 2 plus Y. And that's the only time I have ever used algebra since being forced to learn it in year 8. But education has indeed featured very strongly through my life. I actually have 4 university degrees. And, you know, for me, academia and academic achievement was something that I learnt very early on, was something that I was good at. I knew that I would always be picked last to be on a sporting team, but everybody wanted to sit next to me in the exam. And so it is such an honour to be here tonight at the inaugural Crescent Awards to really recognise and celebrate the achievements of young Muslims here in Australia. Because the truth is that we haven't had it that easy over the last 2 decades. We've faced a lot. We've faced a lot of challenges as a community here over the last 2 decades in Australia. And I don't want to dwell on that, because tonight is not the night to dwell on that. But it's something that we shouldn't also forget either, or we shouldn't gloss over either. But mashallah and alhamdulillah, what a remarkable community we are, that we are where we are at now. That we are in a situation where there are 4 Muslims in the federal parliament. 4 Muslims in the federal parliament. Where we have Muslim leaders that our youth can look up to. And where we have youth, young people, that we can look up to. Young people that we can learn from. Young people that we can celebrate. Young people that we can hold our heads high and say, we are Muslims. We have a place in this country. And not only do we have a place in this country, we have contributed so much to Australia, and there is yet so much more that the future generations will contribute. I want to make a promise to all the young people here today. And that promise is that, you know, I may have been the first, but I will certainly not be the last. In everything that I do, you are in my mind. In everything that I do, in every step that I take, it is a step to make your future easier, to forge a pathway for you. Because when I was your age, living here in the western suburbs of Sydney in Lakemba, I keep saying Lecompo because we used to call it Lecompo because everyone was on Compo back then. It's true, right? I'm not wrong. Back when I was living here in Lakemba, there was nothing for us. There were no Muslim schools. I remember once my parents tried to send us to Arabic school on the weekend. The last thing we wanted to do was learn ba and ta on our Saturday mornings. But we didn't have the sense of community that, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we have now. that we have today. And so I want us all just to take a minute and look around, because let me tell you, from up here, it is a beautiful sight to see this community together here today to recognize, acknowledge and celebrate the academic achievements of our young people and our educators. So please just take a moment to look around at us. This is us. This is who we are. This is Australia. This is Australia. I wanted just to share with you in the last 5 minutes that I have, because I realise that I am between you and the main course. I wanted to share with you the story of my mother, Hamida Mahmoud Osman. My grandfather, Mahmoud Osman, was not an educated man. He never had the opportunity for an education. He sold textiles in a little dukhan, a little shop on the main road in the village of El Minya, in the Said in Egypt. And Muhammad Osman had 3 daughters from his first wife, my mother being the youngest of them. And all the men who would visit Muhammad Osman in his shop would say to him, "Why do you send your daughters to school? Your daughters don't need an education." This was 1930s, 1940s Egypt, you know, it wasn't unusual. It was for women to not get an education. And they would say, Muhammad Osman, you don't need to send your daughters to school. Your daughters need to learn how to cook and clean and look after a man and find a good husband. But my grandfather was determined that all of his 3 daughters would get an education. That all his daughters would get an education. My mum wanted to study sports science. I don't know, she didn't pass on any sporting anything on to me, I don't know. And so without her knowledge, my grandfather enrolled her in nursing school at Asr al-Aini Hospital in Cairo. She didn't know when she finished school. And he bought her uniform, he bought her the little watch that she needed, he bought her books, he bought her everything, and he announced to her, "You're going to the nursing college in Asr al-Aini." My mother cried, and she refused because she didn't want to be far away from her family. But on the day of her enrollment, my grandfather, Mahmoud Osman, took my mother by the hand to Asr al-Aini and dropped her off at the gates of the nursing college there, where she would sleep and live for the next 3 years. And the matron at the school came out to greet my mother and take her hand and lead her in. And my grandfather said, "I want to see where my daughter will be sleeping for the next 3 years away from her family." And the matron said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Osman, you can't come in here. The nurses' quarters has never been visited by a man, and it's only for women." My grandfather said, "I am a Saidi, and I am not leaving until I see where my daughter will be sleeping for the next 3 years. I will camp out these gates until you let me in to see where my daughter is sleeping." And so the legend is, all across the lands of Egypt, that Mahmoud Osman was the first man ever allowed into the nurses' quarters of Asr al-Aini. My mother trained as a nurse. She came to Australia where her qualifications weren't accepted. My father was an engineer. His qualifications weren't accepted either. My mother worked in aged care. She nursed John Howard's mother when John Howard was the treasurer, and has very fond memories of Mrs. Howard. Not so fond of young Johnny Howard though, but very fond memories of Mrs. Howard. And then she went on to become the head of nursing at Lidcombe Hospital, not so far from here, I believe, and have a wonderful career as a registered nurse. And all because of a father's determination to see that his daughter got educated. I am the product of that history. 23 years of formal education. I am the product of that history. To me, it's a testament of the value of education. To me, it's a testament of how education changes individuals, it changes lives, it changes families, and it changes communities. And I cannot be more prouder to stand here today and look at all the young people and the educators that we are here to celebrate. So I wish you all a very wonderful evening. I hope that this is the inaugural awards night, and I hope to see you at many, many, many more awards nights in the future, and to see the young people who are nominated and receiving awards tonight up here on the stage, delivering a keynote as a professor, as a doctor, or engineer, doctor or engineer. Yeah, we know. Or maybe even the next member of federal parliament. Thank you.